Welcome everybody to She Rises. I am Leslie Kuster. I'm the host of She Rises. The name of this live stream show is Giving Women Visibility. And we have a guest today, and her name is Laura Carney. And I'm really excited to bring her on. As many of you know, I published a book recently, 7 Keys to 7 Figures, the Women Entrepreneurs Guide to Money and Freedom. And it's really fun for me to speak right now with like other writers and other authors. If you haven't gotten my book yet, if you haven't gotten the bonuses, definitely go grab them. The bonus is on my website. You can just go to lesliekuster.com to the book link. And if you get the book through the page, I give out the free bonuses, and probably the one that will be the most beneficial to you is my video series on taking action, because I know taking action is often a really difficult thing to do. So with that, I am going to introduce my guest. I'm really excited to have her here. Let's see. And she is having a little bit of difficult time connecting, I see. Oh, there she is. Okay. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about her. So Laura is a writer. Laura Carney, she's a writer. She's a copy editor in New York, which is where I'm from as well. And her work as a copy editor has been primarily in a lot of the really big magazines. I mean, we're talking about Good Housekeeping and Vanity Fair and People and, GQ and all of that. So she really is a professional writer. But she did something really special recently, which is she wrote a book called My Father's List, which published recently in June just of 2023. And in addition to all of that, there's been so much publicity and interest in her book. And she's been on CBS News Sunday Morning. She's been on NPR, which I actually love that station, on BBC. She's been on the Drew Barrymore show. She's been on NBC Nightly News. So there's been a lot of publicity around this book. And so I was really interested to bring Laura on to talk about why she wrote the book, basically, and how this all happened. So I'm really excited to bring her on. So Laura, are you ready? Okay, we're going to add Laura to the stage now. So welcome, Laura.
Oh.
You're here. You're here and you're live right now.
Hi, I was trying to connect to my Facebook streaming too. It's my first time doing this. I'm sorry.
Do you want to give it a try still, or you want to just...
Oh, no, it's working. For anybody who's watching, I'm on the My Father's List page right now.
That's so good. So right now, the reason why I love StreamYard and I've been using this is because I am live right now on my platforms of YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And Laura right now just connected her Facebook to it. So she's live on her platform. So it's kind of like a win-win for everybody, which is why I love using StreamYard. So, and it's live, which is really fun, right, to do it that way. So welcome, Laura. I'm really happy you're here. I'm really happy to meet you. We've been emailing each other, but we actually haven't met each other's faces. So I'm really glad you're here. So you're a professional writer, which is pretty cool, right? So I just want to kind of start with that part of it, is like, why did you become a writer? How did you make it that it actually became your profession? You're actually paid to be a writer. Like, what encouraged you to take that path rather than get jobs other places or do other things?
Wow, that's a great question. I feel like I'm still figuring it out myself in some ways. I mean, by occupation, I'm a copy editor, which means I do the stuff that's a little bit boring, the spelling errors, the grammar, the punctuation, but I love it because I'm a word nerd. And I get to write occasionally. I always sort of had this plan that if I could just get a job at a women's magazine, just get my foot in the door anyway, like any way I could, then at least I'd be in the right place at the right time in case someone needed somebody to write something. But, before that, before I got my dream job in women's magazines, I worked at places like the Associated Press. I worked at a small trade magazine. I really just sort of worked my way up, taking jobs where I did get a chance to write quite a bit, and I did get a chance to expand upon my journalism degree, and just write anything. I wasn't picky. Like if someone gave me an assignment, I would do it. Usually I'd have a title like editorial assistant or assistant editor, which is what you do when you're just starting out. But it was a great way to get my feet wet because, I got to learn about topics I might have not written about on my own. Like I remember when I started at the Associated Press at the business desk, I was doing car sales, or I was doing, I was having to update the stock prices every day and the gas prices. And, I don't think I ever would have entered that world if it at the time wasn't, just the job, my first job that I had. But in the end, one of the most interesting things that has happened is I've had so many different jobs in such a variety of topics and a variety of publications that I think by the time I was ready to become a book author, and I was going to end up writing about something that required a lot of versatility because, what I wrote about was my dad's bucket list, and it had sports and it had travel and it had, sweeter topics and it had gardening, like it just had so many different kinds of things to write about. By then, I think it had been just about 20 years. So I had developed my resume to such a degree that even if I was just copy editing and not writing, I felt comfortable covering those topics. There's just something that happens, I think, even as a copy editor where you're absorbing it through osmosis, if that makes sense. Like you're getting better just helping other people with their work.
So this is is it the first book you actually published?
Yes.
My father. Okay. So why, and can you give us like background on your dad?
Yeah. My dad and I were super close, and, I think, not just because he was a writer too, but he died the summer I moved to New York for a magazine internship. And it was very sudden. It was unexpected. It was because of a distracted teenager who was making a phone call at a red light. Okay. And it was devastating, and it changed my entire view of life, basically. But, my dad and I had such a close bond in that, I think I get my writing ability from him. He was also an entertainer. He was the guy who is like the center of attention at a party, but also he had this unique ability to really connect with people and make people feel seen and really like hear people. So I always felt that way with him, especially being like kind of a shy kid.
Yes.
Like he always sort of brought me out of my shell. So when I was in college and I was studying journalism, he used to call me Lois Lane, and he would tease me about it. Because that's the other thing that he was really great at, is he was really great at making me, not take myself too seriously, because I was a very pensive kid. And just that was my mode of operation, was to be very serious about whatever it was I was doing. So I really think, even though, his death was very untimely, when it happened, because I knew what he cared about, and I knew that he loved writing, and I knew that he was so excited that I had taken this huge risk, which also was not like me, to move to New York City and do this internship, that I couldn't give up on it. Like I had to stay, I had to keep pursuing it. And, when he died, he got this, it was a very, very small insurance settlement. It was like a life insurance settlement. And I just chose to use that to try to survive in New York, because I thought that's what he would want me to do. So, that led to all of the jobs that I had, and which wasn't easy. It was still climbing a ladder. But by the time I had reached the age where I was ready to get married, and I had also by then become an activist with safe driving, I think it was like just a perfect storm situation. The timing was perfect for my dad's bucket list to appear. And I've always felt like one thing was always leading to the next. So by the time I was ready to write my book, he had sort of been guiding me all along.
Oh, first of all, I'm really sorry about you losing your dad. How old were you at the time when that happened?
I was 25.
And your dad?
He was 54.
Yeah, I'm really so sorry about this. I also have had quite a lot of deaths in my life, and at 17, losing boyfriends, and it happened actually a few times. So I've always felt that now that I'm, much further on in my life, I really could look back now and I could really see how these really difficult things that happen and challenges and losses that we have, like, push us in completely new directions or even more directions at the time. And I really relate to what you just said about how you just arrived in New York, you were scared, you were nervous, you're taking on an internship, something that wasn't comfortable for you.
Mhm.
And you knew that when your dad passed, that the best thing you can do with the little bit of money that was there was to keep going. And you knew your dad really wanted you to do that. And you may not have done that, right? You may not have. Who knows?
Yeah,
You may have gone home. Who knows what would have happened?
there's a good chance.
I really do believe these challenges that we have are so deeply difficult, but they're so deeply transformational as well. And they could bring us into whole new areas. So you wrote it. So why now? Like, why you wrote it now and not last year or the year before, or maybe you did write it the year before and it just got published. Like, why not 5 years ago or so? How come it came to you that it was time to write this book? And tell us also, not everybody even knows what this book is about. Some people don't even know what a bucket list is exactly. So why then, and what is it?
Okay, well, here's the book right here. It's called My Father's List, Living My Dad's Dreams. There's me, the little person at the top. But I finished it. It came out in June. I finished it in January, and I actually wrote it the entire time I was doing the list. People ask me about that a lot. Did you wait until it was over? And I always looked at writing the book as a list item, because the third item on the list said write and have a few novels published. Because as I said, my dad was a writer too, and so a bucket list is basically it's a list of things that the traditional definition is it's a list of things you hope to do before you kick the bucket, before you die. And we just sort of started calling it that because when we found it, my dad wrote it in 1978, and that term didn't exist yet. But I mean, that most closely resembled what this was. And essentially, he wrote it then right after I was born. He didn't tell anybody about it, not even his closest friends. I know because I've asked them all. He just kept it in his wallet his entire life.
Wow.
And my mom knew about it because she remembers when he was writing it. But it was tucked away in this box of things that my brother got after my dad died. And he didn't even know it was there until he was about to, we both got married in the same year. So I got married to the man I had met the summer my dad died. So this is now 13 years later. And luckily, my husband did meet my dad just the one time. Mm-hmm. And then he died 5 days later. Yeah. So I always have that sort of to hold on to. And when my brother was about to get married, we went up to his house and he had this list and he said, did you know this existed? And of course, I didn't know what it was. And he didn't really know what to do with it. And it was unlike any experience I've ever had in my life. As soon as I saw this list, I knew immediately, almost like something was just telling me this, like coming through me and saying, I guess it might be similar to, when you had your moment, when you reinvented your career and you said, I want to change something here. I think I didn't know it yet, but I was in a similar place where I was ready to change something. And I just knew in an instant, I'm supposed to finish this. I'm supposed to finish this for him. And, you could say, oh, it was because of my activism, because I had been working as an activist for a couple of years, which had sort of happened by accident. Just an article about safe driving was on my desk one day at work. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, I didn't even know what distracted driving was. And it was a phone in the case of my dad's death. And maybe I'm supposed to contact this man in this story and do something with this. So I had been doing that for a little while. And I did feel like I was making some headway with it only because I worked in magazines and I had contacts at newspapers. So I was sort of helping these activists get a platform that they might not have had otherwise, like in a bigger way. But I just kept thinking there was something more. There was something more I could do, and I just didn't know what it was. And also at the same time, there was something about the activism I was doing that wasn't giving me the feeling of, I don't know, giving my dad the tribute I thought I wanted him to have. So when this list showed up, it sort of solved a problem in that way, because it's like, oh, this is what it is. Like, this best represents who he was more than anything I could think of. And it was just like amazing to see, oh, he wanted to grow a watermelon, you know, like he wanted to go to the World Series. He actually did do that one. My brother remembered when he did it, and he wrote the score underneath of it, so we would know that he went. I mean, that's so funny. I said, so we would know, as though he expected someone to find it someday, but I'm sure he wasn't even ever thinking about that.
But how many items were on the list, on his list?
There are 60.
Oh, that's a big bucket list,
yeah.
right?
It was a lot to bite off. But he had done 5 of them, and he marked one as having failed at. And, you know, just the fact that he had been doing this the whole time, but not telling anyone. I mean, that's so my dad. And the fact that he wrote it down at all is so him. I mean, none of that surprised me, that he would have been that intentional, because he always used to talk about, you know, he would talk about the virtue of selfishness, which I always misunderstood. Like, I thought, oh, what is he saying? Like, it's good to be selfish in your life and care about yourself. And that's not what he was talking about. He was talking about, I think it was an Ayn Rand concept, and also Thomas Jefferson too. It's just the idea of how if you do things in your life to develop who you are as a person, you're actually equipping yourself better to help people. You know, you're just making yourself a better version of you. And to take the time and energy to do that is really worthwhile. So the fact that he had been talking about that forever, he wrote a book too in his 70s, or in the 70s, which he had in his backseat of his car. So, you know, number 3 on the list was write and have a few novels published. And I thought, well, he already wrote the one. So I guess if I write a book about this experience, that will count as a few. I couldn't back out of it, basically, because I had tried before. I had tried to write about him, and I always gave up.
Okay. Yeah, Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged is probably my favorite.
I mean, I don't agree with everything she said, but that was a good one.
Yeah, but I love that, the virtue of selfishness. I think that's actually, you know, this show is really for women entrepreneurs, and I think this is something a lot of us need to really realize. You know, being too nice or being nice all the time for the sake of being nice or liked or whatever, it's not an act of self-love, really, and right. And you know, we need to really stick up for ourselves and protect ourselves. And selfishness often leads us to like extraordinary places and abilities and experiences, right? And then affect other people's too in a good way. So I love that that's one of the teachings you had from your dad.
Yeah, I mean, I have this way of reaching people I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, totally. Did you do the bucket list?
Oh yeah, I finished it.
You finished it. You did all of it.
I did all of it, yeah.
Whoa.
It took me 6 years, but I did it.
That's incredible. What can you tell us a couple of them and a couple stories from them?
Yeah, sure.
Little experience of it.
You know, I like to call some of the list items quieter. Those are the ones that are a little bit less flashy, but they were still just as, like, every single one was just as important as the others. And, you know, like one of my favorites is make my spouse feel happy, healthy, pretty, young every day of her life, which I applied to my husband. And, you know, give my children the best example, the best education and most love I can give. You know, like these were really goals that just for a life well lived. It wasn't just, these are, you know, fun experiences I want to have before I die. And he really, I think, wanted to develop himself further. And, you know, I think the one that people often want to know about is the skydiving one. It said skydive at least once, which I always thought was funny that he said at least once. Like he thought he'd love it so much he would do it a couple times, which I might. I've had some people ask me to come do it again. But that was very transformative for me because, I looked at it as an opportunity because sometimes I would combine the list items. So like combine that one with talk to a TV audience, which I did actually end up doing later because I got to be on the Tamron Hall show last year after I published the book. But I got to go skydiving with a local reporter and they paid for me to do it. And then after it was over, he put a microphone in my face and then I told the audience why I did it. I didn't plan on the fact that I was going to have puke all over my shirt because while I was midair, the adrenaline rush and just the, when the tandem jumper pulls his cord, it's just such a shock to your body that there's nothing I could do about it. It just came out of me. And, it was transformative, I think, mostly because the puke happened, because I was going to be on TV with that, because I was scared to death. Really, like I just screamed and screamed when I jumped out of the airplane, which is pretty normal. And then I threw up, which is another thing that's pretty normal. And I was a perfectionist. I mean, go figure. I was a copy editor, right? Like my job was finding perfection and perfecting stories. And I was like looking at all of the little details before we got in the plane, like, should that parachute be hanging out that way from your backpack? And like, I'm going to save my own life because I caught that one detail, And like I said, my dad was the kind of person who was always trying to get me to have fun and take life a little less seriously. So, the fact that I threw up midway through doing this completely terrifying thing, and then it dawned on me, oh my God, this is about to be on TV. That was so his spirit, because it was just like, Laura, stop taking yourself so seriously. Life is supposed to be like a game. It's supposed to be fun. Just let go. And of course, when I landed, that became hilarious to the reporter who had also just landed. And we became friends and we talked for like 2 hours or so after the skydiving. And, that's one of the things I think that was the most rewarding for me, whether it was skydiving that day with a stranger or, riding horses in the desert with my cousin. Or, I got to meet Jimmy Carter for Talk with the President, and my husband was there for that, and we made like a lifelong friend that day too, who helped us with it. Each one of these list items, I was always finding somebody in my life who knew how to do whatever it was, and they would just volunteer their time and volunteer their efforts and energy, and it was such a different feeling for me than when my dad passed away. Mm-hmm. Because at 25, I just didn't know who I could talk to about it. And I didn't know how to get the support that I needed. And quite honestly, I find that if a death is sudden and scary like that, people shy away from talking about it because it's just like, they always have that phrase, I have no words. It's like, What do you even do? It's just so tragic. And my dad was so beloved by so many people. So to now have something that people could do to support and to help. And also it was fun, and also it was celebrating my dad's spirit.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't know him and they just knew me, it was so healing for me because it was like they were channeling him for me. And then after a while, I started realizing, well, what if I'm also channeling him for them?
Yes.
So now he was getting to have this incredible legacy, touching all of these people through me. And of course, this is almost going to make me cry, but I had no idea that after this list was done and the book was finished and it was out there in the world, that it was going to touch thousands of people. That all these people reading this book now who weren't even there for the list journey, they know my dad and he's changing their lives. I mean, how incredible is that?
Yeah, that is incredible. And can you say your dad's name? Because I think that's
my dad's name was Michael. Well, he went by Mick Carney.
Mick Carney. So thank you, Mick Carney. I mean, you just said so many intense things.
I know. Sorry, I tend to do that.
I love that. I mean, one of the things you just touched, and I just want to go back to it, which is how difficult it is for people to hear about somebody dying and passing and what to say. And most people are like, I'm sorry, but I don't know what to say. I have no words. And for someone like you and someone like me who have gone through this, and many people listening who have gone through this, I think everyone wants the name to be said, and that,
Yes.
that I'm sorry you lost your dad, Mick. I'm sorry you lost this person. I miss him too. I miss her too. And I think there is nothing that anybody really can say to make anything better, because personally, I think grief is probably the most painful emotion any human being could ever go through. But I think just acknowledging that someone has pain and that they're there with you and they witness it is all you really need to do as someone who's listening to this.
Yeah, just sit with them. Just
Yeah.
say, this is, what I like to do is just, even though it feels abnormal and just like an anomaly in the person's life that someone has died, I do my best to just be normal me with them and be like, hey, we're normal. Everything's still normal. Because, what I found was the more I wrote about my father's death alongside these incredible stories of these adventures I was going on, and alongside these incredible memories I still had of my childhood, suddenly I could accept it. Even, I'm not saying that, distracted driving is not acceptable in any way, but I could accept that it had happened and it was no longer an anomaly in my life. And I didn't anymore have to be, pre-car crash Laura and post-car crash Laura. That's not how I had to exist anymore. I was like I was reaching back and grabbing myself from before a traumatic event. And now that person gets to exist again today.
I love that. I mean, the whole experience has healed you, has transformed you. It truly has. And it's like, really, the word that keeps coming up for me is like courage. That you, I don't know you, and I don't know you before, and it just didn't sound like, you were the most courageous person anybody's ever met in their life. That you were nervous going to New York City and doing an internship. So it sounds like courage is one of the many things that you've really grasped from doing this. And so I kind of like want to ask you your opinion, like how has this changed you, and how also has it changed other people's perception of you?
That's a great question. Gosh, I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that before. That's really good, Leslie. I think the courage that I'm now tapping into, I was always there. I think I was very courageous as a young kid. I was the kid who was like climbing every tree, and like just getting bruised up every summer. I was such a tomboy as a child. And I think what happened in my case was when I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. And that was something that took a couple of years for me to treat effectively. But it also, because it was such a formative time in my life where I was developing my sense of identity, it really like made me more cautious and made me feel like, oh, I need to hide this about myself so nobody judges me. Because it was still, back in that time period, it was still stigmatized. It's not like that today, but back then it was. So it made me, I think, become this overachieving, perfectionistic person. And at the same time, I couldn't achieve too much because I just wanted to be loved, and I wanted some man somewhere to accept me, and to date somebody who for once wasn't saying, oh, you think a lot. That was a thing I got all the time. And I think that's something that is universal. I think a lot of women at that age go through that, where we start hyper focusing on our value, like the role we're going to play in someone else's life, as opposed to figuring out who we actually are. So I think in my case, because doing this bucket list, it was just so like obscenely out there. Like it was so different from at age 38, what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I mean, I had been building this career for years. Now I was finally married. What was supposed to come next? I was supposed to have a family. I'm supposed to buy a house. I'm supposed to settle down, lean into that part of my life. And I just, all I wanted to do was travel and write. That was all I wanted to do. And I thought, how am I going to do it all? How am I going to combine all these things? I just didn't know And then my husband also wanted to travel and write. And also he's a photographer. He wanted to be a traveling photographer. And we would tell people that, like, after our honeymoon, we're like, we figured it out. Here's what we're going to do now. And people would think we were nuts. They're like, do you know how hard it is to get a job as a travel journalist? It's like the hardest thing in the world. And everybody wants to do that. Of course they do. It's so much fun. So I thought, okay, well, apparently my goals are crazy. So I guess I better just adjust to what everybody wants for me. But I was miserable. I had 6 months after my wedding where I was just so unhappy. And then this list showed up. And what do you know? There's like 8 travel items on the list. You know, there's like, I had just become a long distance runner, just purely because I wanted to fit in at work. You know, again, that goes along with the whole just wanting to fit in and be accepted idea. All the people at my new job were running the New York Marathon. So now I trained to do that too. And I really fell in love with it. It actually, I think, kind of set me in motion to start dealing with my grief, because there's just something about that exercise that works it through you. But then this list arrives, and the list has run 10 miles straight on it, you know, swim the width of a river, go sailing by myself. They're just play golf. Like, there were so many sports items on it that I had already just sort of started getting in touch with. And it was going to lead me further down that path to reconnecting with that girl, that fearless girl that I had lost. So I think probably what has happened, I think my husband sums it up best, because I have to admit, when I started on this journey, and even before I started writing it as a book, I was very concerned that this would affect my marriage. And this would make me selfish and self-centered. And, you know, he would get sick of it. And not even just that, but what if it changed me? What if I no longer was this person he married? Instead, what happened was he said it was like with every single list item, I was peeling off layers. And I was getting myself back down to that 25-year-old he had met and the person he always knew I was deep down. So like, it was actually great. And, you know, I think the reason for that is when we are courageous, we're being vulnerable. And when we're being vulnerable, we're being true to who we are. And if you want love to work, you really have to be true.
Well, you definitely have to keep this guy in your life. That's for sure. It's not everyone has that experience, and that's something like I've witnessed myself, not with my husband, because I have a fantastic husband also who supports me completely, but just with other people's perception of even myself when, you know, I went from having, you know, a mediocre business to a highly successful business. And I remember some comments, just like innocent little comments, like, someone said to me, yeah, I'm shocked you did this well. Like, why are you shocked, right? Like, because the perception of who I am did not meet, you know, who I was, basically. And this is something I think is also important to talk about in women in entrepreneurship, whatever you do, that becoming more successful, becoming more yourself, becoming more courageous, stepping out of the comfort zone, all those kind of things that may bring you more money or more success or more freedom or whatever. It also brings a completely new identity of who you are, and it's different than who you were. And the people around you have to kind of either adapt, embrace you like your husband has done, or you may have to change. So I always find this very, very interesting as we change, because not everybody takes steps out of their comfort zone in the level, Laura, that you have done. I mean, really, that's what's so impressive about all of this. I mean, I can name 5 things. The action that you take, because a lot of people have ideas, but they don't actually do anything, right? The action that you took, and then the courage that you needed to do it, and in uncomfortable situations, sometimes, like jumping out of planes and getting throw up all over you. Really, I'm really inspired by what you've done. So
thanks. Well, I mean, you know what I think the secret is to that? Because I have had what could be considered really overwhelming, if you call it, my rise, based on, you know, the name of your show that we're on right now. It's been quite a ride over the past year with, you know, people tell me I'm famous. And I'm like, what are you talking about? But I did get out there to a high degree with this book. And it could be perceived as something that's extremely overwhelming and, well, what are people going to expect from me now that they've seen what I did and, what do I do next? But I think what helped me a lot with it was the fact that I guess it was about year 2 of doing the list, and I reached my absolute lowest point with it. And I had lost my job. I had no money in my bank account. I had injured myself doing a list item. I tore a tendon in my foot and I had to go get surgery for it. So now I was on a couch for 2 months and I couldn't walk. My husband was bringing me oatmeal, you know. I just thought this is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. And on top of that, I had this agent at the time who was going to help me sell the book once it was done. But he told me, go, radio silent. Make everything private on social media. Get rid of your Instagram, get rid of your blog. We need to make sure nobody sees it, because that way, when I bring you to publishers, they won't think everybody can just go get this for free. So I did that. And I did that for almost 2 years. And one of the results of it was I thought, oh, nobody cares. Nobody cares about this thing I'm doing. And I would get so envious of Instagram influencers and these people getting thousands of followers. And meanwhile, I'm stuck at, I don't know, 100 or something. However many were there at the beginning were the ones who were still doing it. But what I found was so beneficial, actually, in the end, about him telling me to do that, was that when I was going through that time, I had so few people invested and paying attention to it that I could get down to the purity of what I was doing. And I could say to myself, okay, this book might never be published. Nobody might ever even know really that I did this. And I might lose my career. I might lose my ability to run. I might lose everything that I care about. I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to do it because I have to see it through. And it's about my dad and me. And I think that really is the reason why, no matter what accolades I might be getting for having done this thing, it was never about the outcome for me. And it was always about my soul needs to be on this journey. And there's going to be good times. There's going to be horrible times. And it's just whatever I'm learning from it. It's unique to my experience and my own spiritual growth. And you're nodding your head, so I feel like you must have gone through something like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you and I wrote a little bit to each other yesterday, and by email, and I just really giggled. I wrote you back saying, I love what you just wrote, because the writing of my book I wrote it because I had to write it. I mean, it just was literally that way. It whatever happened, wherever it goes, or whatever happens to it, or whoever finds it and reads it, I needed to write these words. And I was actually talking to someone who runs a book club yesterday. And, I was saying that when I was writing my book, a lot of times you have other readers to read books to get you into different directions, or make sure the book's going is understandable, all that. And I didn't want anybody's opinion. I needed to write the book. I needed to write for myself. And wherever it went to is where it's supposed to go. So yes, I totally, completely relate to what you just said.
Yeah, and I think once you open yourself up to anything is possible, any bad thing could happen, but I'm still committed. Then when any good thing happens, you don't get fazed by that either. You don't fall prey to hype, because it's the reason you did this. And as soon as I finished writing that book, I thought to myself, the list item said write and have a few novels published. It didn't say write a few bestsellers. It didn't say what they had to be. It didn't even say they had to be good. It's just get it done. Just do it. Just have the experience of doing it. So I felt successful already. And I actually think now that might have had an impact on how it was embraced by people, because I was already bringing that confidence to it.
Yeah, I love that. It was great advice you got from that agent as well, which was great. So what happens now, Laura? What's motivating you? What's inspiring you? What's feeding you? What's bringing you joy right now?
I mean, now's the really scary part. If you think about it, you would think I'd be past that. But I think the really scary part is now, how do I take this incredible journey I was on and apply it to my regular life now that the list is done? And I did go through a period this winter. I feel like everybody had a terrible winter this year. I'm sure not everyone, but I know a lot of people had tough winters. And I went through a time of grief where I had to realize, okay, my book launch is done. I'm still doing speaking events, but that's done. And I have to let go of this now. And now I'm having to let go of the book and the list on top of my dad. So it's like I've added more things to grieve for. But then I realized, I need to do the same thing I've always done, which is let his example inspire me to apply that love and care and motivation to my own life. So I started writing my own bucket list while I was doing his. I've checked off, I think, about 50 items now. It's a lot longer than his. It's like 267, I think. But I really, I looked at it and I thought, I need to organize this thing. I need to start making plans. I got to do one of them during the book tour, which was awesome, which was Ride the Lakeshore Limited. So I had a reading in Chicago, and I just took the train from New York, and it was like such an incredible adventure to get to do that. And now I'm doing my list, and I think that is just something I'll have now for the rest of my life as a guide, as I pursue anything. And I just am going to keep following my curiosity. I want to write a second book. One of the really cool things that happened while I was doing my dad's list was when I would research each item before I did it, I would find stories about other people who had done them. And a lot of times they were women. And a lot of times I was discovering women who had been just the first person to do something. Not just like a woman did it too, but a woman did it first. So I thought, well, that would be cool because I've never seen a book like that before. And now I feel like the first woman who has finished her father's bucket list and written a book about it. I mean, I might be the first person who's ever done that. So I need to learn how to fill that role and how to live that life where that's what I am now. So I think I'm going to do that. It's maybe combined with personal narrative. I don't know. I want to train for a half Ironman and finish it finally. I've done 2, but I haven't finished yet. So I feel like those 2 goals go together somehow. Just I'm learning now how to be who I am and be my own role model.
That's what it sounds like. Sounds like you've given yourself your own power, basically. And now now even more who you are, who Laura Carney is. And that's what you're going forward with. So this has been so inspiring. And I just want to show everybody here that to contact Laura, is that the best place to contact you at this website by lauracarney.com? And I'm sure they can buy the book everywhere. Do you want to say anything else about where they could find you or the book?
Yeah, you should be able to find it on Amazon, bookstores. I'm in Target and Walmart too. And I'm my father's list basically everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I don't use Twitter as much, but I'm on there too. But one thing I want to talk about too, though, is I've been very grateful to have the opportunity now to teach other people how to do their bucket lists. And I think some of those people might be watching today. So I just want to give a shout out to them to be in a position now where I can help people. Just write down what they care about, write down what they want to do, and I can guide them through it. That's been one of the greatest honors for me. And I'm hoping to use the Start a Charitable Foundation item on my dad's list as a means to help fund other people's bucket lists. That's what I'm hoping I can do next. And then I'm being my dad for them.
I love that very much. As you were speaking, I was thinking, oh my God, I really need to write my bucket list. And you changed my perception of a bucket list, because before it might have been 7, like go, I don't know, Machu Picchu. And I was thinking more like that, which is, I think, how everybody thinks of bucket lists. But I love the one they said before, be kind, to your spouse, all that one.
Yeah.
Could also be that. So yeah, you can do that, Laura. You can now inspire and help other people to create their own bucket lists and follow their values, their goals, their dreams, and all of that. So thank you so much. I'm so happy you've been here today. Everybody check out Laura, check out Laura Carney, check out her book.
My book. Wait, okay.
Hold it
I'm
up.
not good at this yet. Okay, here you go.
Thank you, Mick Carney, for making this all happen as well. And thank you for being here on She Rises. I'll just put you backstage right now. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you, everybody else, for being here today on She Rises. The purpose of She Rises is to give women entrepreneurs a platform to be visible and to really share their story, why they're an entrepreneur, and what they're really bringing into the world. We have wonderful, wonderful people on the show like Laura. And if you are interested in coming on She Rises, then just email me here at leslie@lesliekuster.com. And I would love to have you on the show. So definitely check me out and send it there. And if you want to see any of the past She Rises, just go to my website, lesliekuster.com, and there's a tab there on She Rises. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you next time.